It is just a huge honor for me today to podcast and interview Gary Salman. He's the co-founder of Black Talon Security. Gary is dedicated to data security and understanding the latest trends in the industry, particularly as they relate to the healthcare field. He has a proven executive management track record and over 30 years of experience in software development and computer IT. He also speaks nationally on cybersecurity threats and their impact on the dental community. He has trained thousands of dental offices across the United States on how to maintain best practices in cybersecurity and has been featured in over 30 local and national publications. In addition, Gary has over 15 years as an instructor at West Point, and he is also involved in law enforcement. He started his career designing software specifically engineered for oral surgeons, then built a sizable company, and in 2000 developed one of the first cloud-based practice management systems, which had more than 1,000 users logging in on a daily basis. He also has held marketing, sales, and product development roles for Carestream Dental out of Atlanta. Black Talon Security specializes in network vulnerability and penetration testing for the healthcare market. Unlike IT companies, he specializes in cybersecurity and provide a level of testing and sophistication required to properly protect your network that IT companies simply can't achieve. The severity and frequency of attacks against dental and medical practices is increasing at a dramatic rate, and you do not want to become a victim of some of those attacks. Employee training is a critical component of HIPAA compliance and can help reduce your chances of an attack by 50%. Their comprehensive training program will teach you and your staff how to identify potential cyber attacks and take action on how to minimize them. Cybersecurity training is required under the HIPAA security rule for all dental and medical practice employees. You need to be HIPAA compliant. They can help your risk assessment policies, procedures, and HIPAA. And once again, this is not a commercial. No money has been paid. I called him, not me. And to tell you why I can know what we should be talking about on Dentistry Uncensored, what does the newspaper say today? Top story, March 14th, 2020. That is, it says Eureka Dental Care business has more than $9,000 stolen from its internet paying system. A Eureka Dental Care business internet-based pay system was breached and $9,884 was stolen, Eureka police report. The Oral Facial Surgery Institute told police that on January 28, someone gained access to its payment system and transferred the money to a credit card in England that is through the Bank of Scotland. The internet system allows patients to pay their bill with credit card information. It did not appear any patient's credit card or personal information was taken during the breach. The system is run by an outside party, which told the business to file a claim to recoup the stolen funds, according to the police. As of February 14th, there were no suspects, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I just hear this all the time. What do you make of it? But before we start talking about any of this, everyone wants to hear your thoughts on COVID-19. What are you hearing on the ground of COVID-19 in New York?
Yeah.
You're about an hour. You're in Katona, New York, about a 45-minute hour drive north of New York. What are you hearing on the ground in New York about the coronavirus?
All right, so you have the hotspot in New Rochelle, right? That was kind of the epicenter of these viruses. So, National Guard came in there, kind of locked that area down, try to restrict, who enters, who doesn't.
Which area is this? Where's this?
It's called New Rochelle, New Rochelle, Rochelle. So that's just north of New York City.
New Rochelle, 2 words, Rochelle, New Rochelle, New York?
Correct, yeah, just a very close border to New York City.
And what happened there?
So basically what happened there was an attorney was, infected with the coronavirus, went into a synagogue, infected some members there, and it seemed to have spread to quite a few people throughout that community. I think that's typically what's happening is, they find a hot spot and it seems to spread, pretty dramatically from there. I can tell you that I was on a call on Friday with various government agencies, Homeland Security, CDC, CISA, which is, some infrastructure protection that focuses mostly on the cybersecurity component, a very, very high level meeting, either direct reports to the White House or one step down. And, they were talking about quite a few different things. Obviously the lack of testing kits and how that, may impact it. And you're going to see direct correlations, right? As more people get tested, there will be more positive results. I think this is just obvious things that you're seeing on the media. There was a hyper focus on the cybersecurity component as well. Homeland Security, CISA was really warning heavily about the fact that hackers are opportunists and they're seeing our country in chaos right now. Look what happened. I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but Health and Human Services got hit by a cyber attack last night, right? So think of it this way. Meaning the hackers see a weakness, they see an opportunity. So where do they strike? The one organization that is mostly responsible besides the CDC for trying to mitigate some of the risk that's going on right now. So what you're looking at is hackers being opportunists and striking when we're at a moment of weakness. So there's some very, very significant concerns, not only from our organization, but other law enforcement agencies, as high up as federal agencies, warning the general population to be very, very careful about this remote working concept. Yes, remote working is a fantastic capability where employees can go home with a laptop or their home computer, and log in and work as if they were sitting in their office. But remote access comes with risk. The second small businesses, medium businesses start turning on this remote access, if it's not configured properly, if it's not handled properly, there are hackers that are chomping at the bit with specialized tools that will rip right through these remote access technologies and gain, full, complete access to these networks. So as doctors go and turn on remote access for, team members or themselves to gain access to the system, they have to understand that it definitely needs to be done properly. They don't want to walk into the office after this thing settles down to find out that their system's riddled with ransomware. So, proper steps do need to be, take place. Need to take place is what I was trying to say.
Well, it's amazing you say it because the news today, hackers taking advantage of COVID-19 to spread malware, and that's from Modern Healthcare News. And Modern Healthcare News says hackers have wasted no time figuring out how to exploit the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. So what are is your business changing gears now? I mean, have you kind of had to retool for COVID-19, or how much are you doing today business as usual versus we're in all new territory now?
Right. So I think there's this concept of, it's probably a brand new phrase most people haven't heard of. It's called fearware, right? Instead of malware, fearware. And it's kind of what you just talked about. It's the hackers leveraging this event to try and gain access to networks. So instead of sending you a phishing email trying to get you to reset a username and password, they're going to send you a phishing email related to some important document that you need to download related to COVID-19. And when you click on the link, or open an attachment, you get hit with cyber. In terms of retooling, not so much, to be frank. The technology that we deploy to protect practices is going to remain the same. What does change is the sense of awareness, right? So instead of looking for a password reset request or a fake wire request, a fake invoice, for instance, we sent out a huge email blast to tens of thousands of people on Friday, warning that this fearware, was going to become rampant. And you know what? All those little heat maps that you see that show you where the areas most impacted by COVID are located. So what the hackers are now doing is they're creating similar looking heat maps that look legit, and when you click on them, it redirects you to a malicious website, and then that web server will actually attack your computer. So you have to be very, very careful, of these heat maps and make sure you're using legitimate sites. I typically recommend start at cdc.gov. And go from there, because they're definitely going to have the most up-to-date information related to this.
Wow. Any other COVID-19 news before we go into what we were actually going to talk about?
No, I think that's it. I think practitioners need to be really smart about remote access. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but use the right tools, talk to your IT vendor, and make sure that they truly understand what they're doing. There are some free applications like Microsoft's Remote Desktop Protocol that a lot of IT vendors still use. We highly, highly recommend you don't use that product, right? It is constantly exploited. And I would tell
Which
doctors,
product do you not want to use?
it's called Remote Desktop Protocol, also known as RDP. It allows for, say, a doctor to remote into his or her system, and kind of remotely control a computer. There are some, other products out there, without mentioning specific names, that you can sign up for that provide better, more secure remote access. And whatever remote access tool you do purchase for the short amount of time, hopefully, that we have to work remotely, make sure you turn on what's called multi-factor authentication. Some people call it two-factor authentication. Basically, what it does is when you log into your computer at the office, it will send you some type of authorization on like your cell phone, like a text message or an Apple pop-up, and then you'll say, yes, accept. That is me logging in, not someone from some foreign country.
Wow, that is just great, succinct advice. So if you plan on working from home and need remote access, you should use a software system that texts you say it in your words.
Yeah.
You should use
You should use a remote control software that supports multi-factor authentication.
That uses multi-factor, multi-factor authentication.
Authentication, yep.
Authentication, such as texting you a password to log on.
Yeah, or an app will pop up on your phone saying, "Are you trying to log into this computer?" And you just say yes.
That'll pop up on your computer or on your phone.
Maybe I misspoke. Will pop up on your cell phone telling you that someone's trying to log into your computer, and you can authenticate that it is in fact you trying to log in.
So if you plan on working from home and need remote access, you should use a remote control software that uses multi-factor authentication, such as texting you a password to log on.
Yeah, perfect.
To avoid hacking
hacking or unauthorized access.
To help avoid hackers' unauthorized access. And what was the name of the software that you do not like for remote enter?
Yep, we typically recommend that you don't use remote desktop protocol.
So the lawyers want me to double check. Do not use remote desktop protocol.
Yep, we typically, because a lot of it's a product.
Is remote, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a product that if it's not set up and configured properly, can present the practice with a lot of risk.
Is that a common one, remote desk protocol?
It's a product made by Microsoft.
Oh, wow. Well, how did Microsoft get that wrong?
I'm not going to say they got it wrong, but there's a lot of configuration that has to go into place to configure it properly. And a lot of times the IT vendors don't understand this concept and don't configure it properly and leave vulnerabilities for hackers to gain access.
So you have no problem going on the record saying do not use Microsoft remote desktop protocol
if the vendor does not know how to configure it properly.
And that seems to be the problem, that the remote desktop protocol is okay, just that people don't install it much. Yeah, and I lived through this. I mean, I love Bill Gates for what he's doing now and everything, but my gosh, it was just so horrible when the whole internet revolution came in, and it was 1987. We're buying software and buying Intel computers, and every person installed a Microsoft project said, well, it's just riddled with bugs. You won't even know half these bugs for 6 months. And then you had Steve Jobs on the other side that just made it user-friendly. Anybody could figure it out. And then on the Microsoft side, you had all these booming industries selling CD-ROMs and training on how to use this software that no one just wasn't user-friendly. And Apple didn't have any of those issues. It's just... my gosh. So what's the, are you seeing a big increase in dental offices wanting to work from home?
Not yet. We've taken a couple phone calls from existing clients, just saying, hey, I'm going to start pushing like my billing people to work from home, scheduling people to work from home. I think it's definitely geographically driven. If you look, some of these practices were in the Philly, New York, Boston area, California, the areas that seem to be impacted more heavily. But I have not seen, the widespread quote unquote, panic that I, would have expected at this point. So I think either practices are kind of sitting back and waiting to see if there's a directive from the government, from national organizations. But I think once that happens, then, there'll probably be a big ramp up. And I guess the big question is if the practice is going to close, what do? Do they have a person that kind of answers phones remotely that can do scheduling and rescheduling? Do you keep billing people, remoted into the system so they can collect accounts receivables and bill insurance claims? Look, I think that's all really good things because it gives you some business continuity. Can you keep the cash flow going by having some people working the phones and processing your bills? Personally, I think you can. I don't know what your opinion is, but for me, it sounds like a good way to keep things flowing. Obviously not treating patients, but.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy because of they recommend that you close in your office, they'll say 14 days, but 14 days, it might just start ramping up. You have to realize that if you look at like what happened in Italy, you could be closed for a couple of months.
Yeah, I think it's all unknown, right? It really depends.
It's a very fluid situation.
Absolutely.
So you did. I called you because you did an amazing article for us called "Bite Back." It was in the Dental Town magazine, September 2019. So, cybersecurity expert and security CEO Gary Salman, the man, not the fish, explains how to keep a dental practice from being an easy target. We'll go over that article. You talk about keeping an eye out, do your due diligence. Talk about helpful hints to stop hackers, because the problem with dentistry is we have to wear so many hats. It's hard to figure out how to do a root canal and place an implant, let alone bone grafting and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So what's my homie supposed to do? How much time, effort? What are they supposed to do? And another thing I'm leery about is some of my homies made classic decisions where their local state dental society recommended this firm. And you're like, okay, well, that's my due diligence. Doctors are all smart. They all got 8 years of college. It's a committee. And sure enough, they were hacked into too. You know the case I'm talking about?
Yeah, I absolutely do.
What state was that? Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah, so go over that. So there's a due paying member of the Tripartite Dental Association follows the advice of their association, and look what happens.
Right.
What happened?
Yeah. So let's kind of start with taking a couple steps back. So there's a huge difference between an IT company and a cybersecurity company. It's no different than a generalist and a specialist, right? Say take a GP and an oral surgeon, or a GP and orthodontist, right? They typically do different things. There's different schooling, different training. The same thing applies for cybersecurity. The huge issue that I see in the dental space is that your colleagues are struggling to understand the difference. And we're working with a lot of different state organizations to help explain the difference, right? Your IT vendor does what? They make sure your computers are functioning, they keep them up to date, they fix things when they break, they provide firewalls and antivirus software. And I can tell you 99% of the IT vendors, that's what they do. They don't really provide advanced cybersecurity. So they're still building the networks the same way they built them years ago. They're still configuring everything the same way they built them, years ago. And what's happening is hackers are very advanced now. Right? And they're using very, very sophisticated tools to break into networks. And if you don't layer in additional security above and beyond a firewall, above and beyond an antivirus application, you're going to get hit. Okay? Because whether or not you want to believe it, the hackers are scanning your network. They're looking for vulnerabilities. They're targeting individuals. They're targeting IT companies, right? We need to talk about that because that's a huge problem right now. So how do hackers break in? Let's understand kind of the root cause of these attacks. You want to go through that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go through it. So here's the deal. Every single type of device, whether it's a laptop, a server, a workstation, that smart thermostat you have hanging on your wall, that smart TV in your waiting room, They have a processor, they have memory, maybe even a little hard drive, and they have an operating system. Every single connected device is vulnerable. So to date, there are about 20,000 documented vulnerabilities on devices. And a vulnerability is basically an unlocked door or window on your network. You know what it's like? It's like almost like an alarm system. So I'll give you this is how I describe it. So let's just say you call me and you're like, hey, Gary, you know what? I'm kind of worried about my office. I think someone can easily break in and steal my stuff, right? So I come around and I look at your front door. I'm like, hey, doctor, you don't have a deadbolt on your front door, right? And I noticed at 8:30 at night, your door wasn't locked. And your first floor windows, I can just lift them up from the outside and I can crawl in through the window and get into your office and steal all your stuff. Okay, so the challenge here is, how do I apply a similar type of assessment to a network? And that's where we come in. We scan your network and we find any of these 20,000 known vulnerabilities. And then we work with the IT vendors to mitigate those vulnerabilities, really lock the doors and the windows. So when the hackers come by and kick on the front door, they kick on your server, they kick on the firewall, they're like, wow, this network's pretty well secured. It's hardened. I'm going to move on to the next dental office, because it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, you named, one of the state organizations, in the state where the largest cyber attack in our nation's history occurred, not just, in the dental space and everything, right? 450 plus practices got hit, right? That the hackers know where to find this information. They know where the money trail is, or they follow the money trail. So this whole vulnerability management concept is critical, right? You have to know where you have risk. And this is what the IT companies are not doing. And frankly, they shouldn't be doing it, right? If you set up your own security, you shouldn't test your own security. It doesn't make any sense. It's like having the fox guard the hen house. And too many of your colleagues, unfortunately, are becoming victims. And after they get hit and they contact us, they're like, wow, if I'd only known about, what you guys did or do, I would have made other decisions or better decisions. And that's what we're trying to do, is educate the market and say, hey, it's a different, it's different timing than it was, years ago. And, it's not 2017 anymore, right? It's 2020, where cyber criminals are actively targeting these networks. And I need to partner with a cybersecurity company. If you look at what's going on in the medical world, if you look at what's going on in the business world, pretty much all of these entities now have an IT vendor, right, known as a managed service provider, as well as a cyber company. Why? Because that's what you need, right? If you really want to be secure with your networks and not worrying about having your data stolen, which we need to talk about, right, having all your data encrypted with ransomware, that's what you need to do. You need to identify these vulnerabilities and mitigate them. So basically what we do is we launch a cyber attack against your firewall and every single device on your network, looking for these vulnerabilities, and then we close the gap. We close the doors on them.
So so you were talking about the Wisconsin deal. Hundreds of dental practices in the U.S. have their computers infected with ransomware this week, according to ZDNet. That was when was that? What was it?
Labor Day.
That was Labor Day.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And so what did and was that the one recommended by the Wisconsin Dental Association, or?
I think it was. Yeah.
Wow. Now, if you were a dental association, it would make me think that you shouldn't be even be in the business recommending cybersecurity.
Or you should be. What do you mean? You should be or shouldn't be?
Well, I mean, you shouldn't be offering the service, or I mean, I wouldn't want any association with it. I mean, it sounds
Right.
like it could hurt your brand.
Yeah. Look, I think there's always risk. What happened in Wisconsin was the cyber attack occurred at the vendor, right? So what we're starting to see is a significant trend where the threat actors, the hackers, they target the doctor's IT vendor. They hack into the IT vendor systems, then they leverage the IT vendor's resources and literally attack every single computer that they manage. So there's a threat group called Sodanikibi. They're a Russian organization. They've done hundreds of millions of dollars of damage in the healthcare space and financial space in 2019. Their entire attack vector revolves around attacking the managed service providers and loading their ransomware code into the managed service provider's update tool, and then telling the update tool at 1 a.m. on Saturday night, or really Sunday morning, go ahead and install our ransomware in every single computer and server that this IT vendor manages. So basically what's happening is the practitioners, right, your colleagues are walking into their office Monday morning and finding every single computer backup cloud system completely encrypted with ransomware. And the way they do that is they breach the IT vendor. They use what's called their remote management tool. They load it in there and they say, hey, at 1 o'clock, go ahead and pull the pin on this hand grenade and throw it. And it wipes out every single computer to the point where no one can recover. 100% of their data is encrypted. So not only the data on the server, the data on external backups, and the data in the cloud. Okay, the cloud data is not always hit, but often it is. The hackers are now doing something different.
What's the name of that group from Russia you said?
It's called Sodonikibi. It's I think it's Sodonikibi. I want to say.
Sodonikibi.
Yep, you got it.
I'm afraid to Google that. I don't want to. They might be searching. Ransom Sodonokibia. Okay, but anyway, so this is you think a lot of this is state sponsored?
That's a tough call. You know, this is a operation that appears to be operating out of Russia. The question is, is their government looking the other way? Are they, doing anything to shut this organization down? I guess the question really is, think about all the money flowing out from the U.S. into that country. I'll leave it at that. So
say it again. What was the last one? Look at the amount of money that's what?
Yeah, look, from these ransomware attacks, if you look at there was attack in Wisconsin. There was attack on Thanksgiving in Denver that hit 100 dental practices. And then there was a nationwide attack that hit about 1,300 healthcare providers, businesses, financial institutions. They were all targeted by this exact same group, Sodonikibi. Now, in all these cases, millions and millions of dollars flowed out from the United States, to these organizations because they had to pay the ransom, right? When all of your data is encrypted by ransomware and you don't have a viable backup to recover it, you have to pay the ransom, right? So your colleagues, on average, in the Denver attack that we dealt with on Thanksgiving, on the low end, I just said average, but on the low end, it was about $30,000. So we dealt with a very small single GP office, with about 6 computers, and they had to pay out 30 grand just in ransom demands. Some of the larger specialty practices that we had to deal with, there were demands over $100,000 in ransom.
And how do you pay ransom? I mean, do you have to do it on a PayPal account, or how do you pay a bad guy?
So you use it, everyone's heard of cryptocurrency, something like Bitcoin. So basically the way it works is the doctor would have to transfer us the money. So let's just say their ransom demand is $60,000. First, the practice has to figure out how to get $60,000 together. Not everyone has $60,000 sitting in a cash bank account.
What was the average ransom? What was the average ransom?
The average ransom, somewhere around 50 grand.
And for what state? Was this Wisconsin, Colorado, or all over?
This is specific. The latest one would be Colorado. So.
Wow. But anyway, the average ransom was $50,000.
Around there, yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, continue your story. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So you have to get the money together. You have to wire it to a company like ours. We convert it into a cryptocurrency. And then we take that cryptocurrency and transfer it directly to the hacking group. So the hacking group will give you basically a digital wallet ID without going too crazy on this whole concept. They give you a digital wallet ID and you transfer it from your digital wallet to their digital wallet. Once they receive the funds, they will then provide a tool that you would run on, or we would run on the doctor's network that would decrypt all of the data. So basically what happens with these ransomware attacks is you walk into your office and you find every single file completely encrypted or locked. So all patient records, x-rays, cone beams, intraoral scans, Word documents, PDFs, images, referral slips, all 100% encrypted. So basically you're useless. As one doctor described it when we were on site, he's like, you know what? It was like I drove up to my office and all I saw was the foundation of my building and everything was gone, right? I mean, that's basically how damaging it is. You can't take x-rays, you can't view x-rays, you can't see your chart, you can't schedule. You have no idea who's even coming into the office. How do you collect accounts receivables? How do you process claims? It's a huge, huge mess, right? And from a business continuity standpoint, it's horrible. I will tell you for a fact that almost all the practices that were hit in Denver, no one got back online in less than 2 weeks, okay? There were a couple practices that had an offsite backup, but pretty much all your colleagues, doctor, they were down for 2 weeks plus. We had some people calling us at the 5-6 week mark saying, hey, I'm still down. All my data is encrypted. I heard you guys helped out a bunch of other practices. Can you help us? So imagine walking into your office tomorrow and finding 100% of your data encrypted. There's starting to be a bigger problem that everyone needs to know about. Sodinokibi, Maze, Ryuk, these are all the names of various threat groups. They've all modified their attack. So guess what they're doing now? When they get into your system, they will first steal all the data out of your system, right? So imagine them taking all your x-rays, all your patient records, EOBs, everything like that. They take it all out of your system. Then they encrypt all the data. If you don't respond to their ransom demand, they will contact you and they will say, hey, that's cool, you don't want to pay us, but guess what? I have 2 terabytes of all your data. And if you refuse to pay me the $50,000 in Bitcoin, I'm going to publish all your patient records to a publicly searchable website. And they do it. Okay. There have been doctors across the US that have not paid, and then they find out that their records are now being published. So you're talking about a HIPAA nightmare. The folks that are saying, oh, I have the state-of-the-art backup system and I'm totally fine. My IT vendor says I'm totally secure. That might be great, and that was good November. But if you don't lock your network down and you don't do these vulnerability scans from a cybersecurity company and your data gets stolen, it's going to be a huge, huge problem, right? And if you think $50,000 is a lot of money to spend, just on the ransom, wait for all the fees associated with, the breach notification, and HIPAA fines. So that's why, we're really trying to help people understand that, once again, this is not 2017. These hackers change their attack vectors, every couple of months because it's a cat and mouse game, right? They do something, we counter it, right? Then they do something and we have to counter again. It's no different than, warfare, right? U.S. builds weapon systems, our adversaries build something to try and defeat it, right? It's the exact same concept in terms of what we're doing. And we do this 24/7, right? This is all we do. The IT vendors, unfortunately, right? They do something really well, and that's building systems and keeping networks configured. That's the big differential between what we do and the IT vendors, and that's the message that we're trying to communicate.
So I'm only able to find ransom.sodinokibi. How are you saying that?
I say Sodinokibi. Yeah.
You call it Sodinokibi?
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of other ones. What were the other ones?
The other is Ryuk, R-Y-U-K, and they are notorious for
R-Y-U-K.
Yep, they are notorious for hitting healthcare systems. Maze, M-A-Z-E, like a corn maze. If you Google that in Google, I think Pensacola, you'll see an article about how they stole the city of Pensacola's data and the city refused to pay and they released data. So.
And is the title of these guys, would you call them ransomware? Is that their title? I mean, is that their genre?
They're known as threat actors or threat groups, but their vector for attack is ransomware.
So you call them threat groups, these threat groups?
Threat groups or threat actors is typically what is the correct terminology, threat actors.
Threat actors, like the ones you mentioned, Sodinokibi, Ryuk, and Maze.
Yep.
And then you say their genre is ransomware, or their specialty.
Their attack vector. I mean, their methodology is to use ransomware. You could say that also.
Is ransomware in healthcare?
Ransomware in healthcare, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, most of these, I mean, they're relatively broad in terms of the types of businesses that they'll hit. Soda Nikibi builds, I'll say business, you know, do the air quotes, but Soda Nikibi, their entire quote unquote business model is designed to attack IT vendors. That's how they deliver their code, right? So it's actually, I hate even saying this, but it's kind of the truth. It's genius. If you can strike one organization and then let's say they have 300 dental practices under management, they get into one organization and then within minutes they can strike 300. It's a game changer, right? And that's why they're receiving such huge payments, because if you have 300 dental practices that have been encrypted with ransomware, right? You know, for the most part, especially if you've scouted out the systems and understand where the backups are, which is what they're doing now. They're conducting surveillance, gathering intelligence. They figure out where your backups are stored. They figure out what cloud technology you have. They take out all those systems first and then hit all the systems with ransomware. If you're a doctor and you've lost 100% of your data, you're going to figure out a way to pay the 50 grand, whether you have to take out a loan, you know, sell off stock portfolios, retirements, because if you don't, your business is over. Right, your practice is done. So, I mean, that's why this is so devastating for the practitioners.
And do you see this in how long have you been doing this? Over how long?
So the security, almost 3 years. I've been doing this.
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
And do you see the problem escalating, maintaining, or contracting?
So it's definitely escalating fast. There was a short period of time in early 2019 where the ransomware attacks seemed to have slowed down earlier in the year. But all the indications starting around Labor Day, you know, were pointing towards massive escalation. If you think about it, you know, 2 out of the 3 largest cybersecurity attacks in the nation's history were conducted against the dental industry. That's crazy. Like, who would ever predict that? They're like, oh, the big banks get hit. But the big banks don't get hit anymore for the most part. Why? Because they've invested too much money and resources into protecting themselves. The large hospitals, they typically don't get hit. You always have the one-offs. But yes, the reason this is escalating so fast is because there is, for lack of a better phrase, blood in the water. Okay, so let's backtrack about a year. About a year ago, the ransom payments were what we typically saw were around $5 grand. So if you were a dental practice and you got hit, come up with $5 grand, pay it, you know, we'll decrypt your data and you move on. Guess what happened? After they started to realize, oh, the dental market, the healthcare market, these guys and women pay, right? So they're going to cough up $5 grand. Oh, they're going to cough up 10 grand. Oh, they're coughing up 10 grand. Let's try 20, you know, right? And then they keep pumping it up. The other problem is cybersecurity insurance, which, you know, don't take it as a problem. I think insurance is absolutely fantastic. But the issue is, if you get hit with a $50,000 ransom demand and you have the proper coverage, the insurance company typically pays for that. So they're like, oh yeah, here, you know, cybersecurity company, go ahead and pay this ransom and get this doctor's data back. So cybersecurity insurance is really great, but think about it this way. You know, as the insurance companies pay more and more, the hackers get more and more greedy. So they keep upping the ransom demand. So, you know, at some point you're going to have a problem. You know, you're going to have a problem where premiums are going to start going through the roof because of all the money being paid out, et cetera. So that's what we're seeing right now.
And where are they getting their hacking insurance from? I mean, it wouldn't be their professional disability. What insurance are dentists getting?
So they can reach out to their malpractice carrier. Typically, a lot of the agents that sell malpractice insurance will offer cyber liability policies. But the question they typically ask is, are you working with a cybersecurity company? Have you had your networks tested? So what's starting to become more and more mainstream is practices that aren't doing this are going to find out that the premiums are going to be much higher, et cetera. The other big problem that practices have to understand is this. If you get hit once by a cyber attack, on almost every questionnaire for liability insurance, it's going to ask you, did you have a previous cyber event? And if you answer yes, I'm guessing the premiums probably go up and you may not become insurable at some point. So it's an issue. So, my recommendation is that first protect your office because you don't want this to happen no matter what. Insurance is great, but what are you going to do when you're down for 2 weeks?
Okay,
right?
so
4 weeks. Yeah.
so
Then
back to the Colorado issue.
Yeah.
Who was the lucky one? The someone who had an offsite backup?
Yeah, there were a couple doctors there that had and this is a fantastic question, so I see where you're going with this. There were some clients that had a physical hard drive that was disconnected from the server and brought home with them. All right, so the issue here is if you have a physical backup that's sitting on your dining room table, per se, and your network gets hit, well, they may take out the cloud backups. They may take out the backups that are attached to that network. But if you have that hard drive sitting on your dining room table, technically you can go back and get your network back up and running. So we're making a big push with disconnected backups. It's almost an old school thought. You probably remember, the days of every evening, the doctor would go home with his or her backup on a backup tape or some type of removable device. And you're like, oh, look, I have all my patient records on this little cartridge. And that was cool back then. Then we're like, oh, let's just put everything in the cloud, right? I'm safe. I got everything in the cloud. Well, then the threat actor is like, yeah, you think so? I'm going to find out where your cloud data is and hit it, right? Or I'm going to find out where you have these connected external backups, and I'm going to encrypt those too. Because here's the thought, all right? This is just, common sense. If your business is to solicit a ransom payment from the victim, don't you think that you're going to do everything you can do to make sure that they have no recoverable backup? 100%. Okay? You're going to surveil the system, find out where they have cloud data. You're going to surveil the system and figure out where they have external drives, hit those, and then the practice basically has no choice. They're going to have to pay.
Wow. So you are recommending at this point that the dentist takes home. Well, you wouldn't have to take it home because these hackers are remote. So if you had the backup and you just sat it on your desk or in a safe that's fireproof in case the office fire, but then again, if the office burns down. But anyway, is that what you're recommending today?
So I do recommend it leaves. And I think you just nailed the two primary reasons. You have some type of fire or theft, right? People understand the value of data. If they see that hard drive sitting on your desk and they broke into your office, I can tell you they're probably going to grab it. Either they think that hard drive is worth something, or they understand, oh, I bet there's some good data. Keep in mind that the data is always worth way more than your equipment is ever going to be worth. So yes, I highly recommend that you have an external backup. Now I think storytelling is really important here because we deal with breaches all over the country, right? And right before the Thanksgiving attack in Denver, and keep in mind one very important thing, these guys typically hit you when you're weak, okay? Labor Day, IT vendors were on vacation. They hit on Thanksgiving, right? IT vendors, critical staff, vacation. Christmas Eve, they struck again.
So you're saying they like to hit on holidays. I mean, George Washington's Christmas surprise. It's very common that people attack you when you're on vacation. You were saying they were attacking on Labor Day and Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
Yep. So they typically, not always, but they typically strike at a point of weakness. So if you look at all the attacks, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, there's probably a really good reason for it. Why? Because IT companies have limited resources because a lot of their technicians are on vacation. Businesses, practices may have limited staffing to deal with it and help recover. And then the flip side is sometimes during these holiday seasons, they're as busy as can be. And every minute that they're down equates to dollars lost. Right. So I think that's important to understand. But yes, I think we were talking about these external backups as well.
So in Colorado, you said it was in the Colorado hacking was over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it happened just a couple days before Thanksgiving. So I want to say that weekend before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay.
So, that's. That it doesn't always go that way, but yeah, you see a lot of those types of attacks. So our country's in a little bit of chaos right now, to say the least. And one of the things that multiple government agencies are warning is, as we talked about earlier, be on the lookout, be careful. This isn't the time to let your guard down. So, but we were talking about backups, and I want to bring up one really good point, because this is the difference between saving your practice and potentially losing everything. When we responded to a cyber attack in New England, it was on a GP's practice, and their system got hit with ransomware through a third party. In this case, it was a billing entity. And what happened was they gained access to this biller, and they used their remote control tools to hit a whole bunch of practices. The doctor came in and met with us, and out of his bag, he pulled out an external hard drive. He's like, I'm pretty sure I won't have to pay the ransom because all of my data is on this hard drive. We're like, fantastic. So we took the hard drive, hooked it up to a clean laptop that we had, and we opened up the files, and almost all of his files were missing. So he had been literally carrying this hard drive home with him for 3 years. He said every night, every night it goes in my briefcase, every night I bring it back. And unfortunately, doctor, there was basically nothing recoverable on that hard drive. When the IT company took over, they did not configure the backup properly. So yes, he thought he was doing the right thing, but in the end, there was nothing there. So one of the things that I would say to all of your listeners is this: reach out to your IT company and say, I want you to prove to me that 100% of my data is on this backup drive. 100% of my data is in the cloud. Okay, that's not only practice management software, but imaging and attachments and financials. So if they use QuickBooks, is that getting backed up? To put that into perspective, the same practice had a USB drive plugged into the computer during the attack. On that USB drive was the backup for all their QuickBooks files. So not only did the computer that had QuickBooks on it get hit, the USB drive that was plugged into the computer that the administrator left in also got encrypted. So they were looking at 100% loss of QuickBooks data.
So you're saying you need to make sure your backup is recoverable, or what'd you say? You need to make sure your backup.
You want to make sure that your backup is actually there. So what happens a lot of times, and this goes back way before even cyber attacks, right? Your server breaks, the hard drives fail, you go to recover your data from your backup tape or some media, and the data's not there because it was never configured properly, right? It wasn't tagging the correct files to back up. They're like, oh, you only have your x-rays. We forgot to tag your,
Okay, so in all honesty, I always admit when I fall down, Japan, what's that famous saying? Successful man fall down 7 times, get up 8. I've fallen down like everyone else.
Right.
We had back in the day, I think it was in the early 90s, we just had where the computer just crashed. It just broke. But we had it back up to a C drive. Turns out she was backing it up to the D drive. Anyway, long story short, we had no backup. So we lost everything. We lost whatever we had in the 30, 60, 90 account receivables, which, 30-day account receivables usually, basically a month's production. And, it was a nightmare. And also the dentists that have this happen because of hackers, it's a double whammy, because not only do you have the loss, but you're personally, I don't know, what do you call it? You've been violated. So it's one thing when you do something and you're just like, okay, I'm an idiot. The buck stops here. I'm the CEO. My fault. But when you know that some other person did it to you with intention, then the animal instincts come out of you, and you feel violated, and you want to hurt someone.
Yeah, it is truly the most horrible feeling, right? And to kind of put it in perspective, a recent practice we responded to that had a cyber attack where all their data was encrypted as well as their backups. After we performed what's called a forensic investigation, where we basically go through all the computers to try and understand what happened, whether or not they accessed data. Throughout this investigation, we were able to uncover the type of ransomware and whether or not patient records were taken. However, during the course of the investigation, it was determined that the hacker moved from computer to computer, and any computer that had a webcam, they turned the webcams on. So one of the doctors, she said, I can't believe this. So you're telling me while I was sitting at my desk in my office, they were watching me. And I said, were you in the office between this time and this time? And she said, yes. I said, then yes, they were. So she talked about feeling completely violated. And then there, some of the laptops had cameras on in the operatories, in the exam rooms. It's not a good situation, right? It's to your point. And that's what I get from a lot of your colleagues. The second they become victims, it's this feeling of being completely violated, because, right, they looked under the hood, they took information potentially. They had access to your information, potentially what websites you go to, everything. That's the least of the issue, but the patient data is the primary, and it's a horrible feeling. And then you go through this process of a forensic investigation to determine whether or not your data is stolen. Sometimes, depending on how many clients we're dealing with, and how many forensic investigations us or another cyber company is dealing with, it could be 30 to 60 days before you find out the results of that investigation. Every day you wake up and you're like, is today the day I'm going to find out that all my patient records were stolen? It's a horrible feeling.
Okay,
right?
Here's a scenario. I want to switch gears completely. I've had in 30 years I've had dental associates. The average they stay with you about 6 or 7 years, but I've had some that were just like the smartest people I know. And one of the dentists that worked for me was actually very good friends with our Dental Town programmer. And he opened up an email one time, and it was it was a bug, it was a whatever, I forgot what it was.
You're right.
But he was so embarrassed that he was tricked, because he's probably the smartest guy that's ever stepped in that dental office. And I don't want to say his name because it'll get back to Sam. But my gosh, so if Sam could click on an email that downloaded something, then his buddy Ken had to come, and it was a nightmare. So how do you train your staff because sometimes I'll get it from a dentist. They'll say, hey, would you consider this article? And he'll say Sam. And I'm like, what? You're a dentist submitting an article, Dental Town, and you give me your first name? There's 2 million dentists on there. I'm just supposed to open this? And then when you go to open it, Microsoft will ask you, is this from a trusted, person or whatever? Right. So can you talk about that, your team? How do you get your team, and if how do you do this? Yeah,
so really, really good point. So it's called cybersecurity awareness training, right? And the program revolves around empowering and educating the entire team. So not only the people sitting at the front desk, but anyone clinical, and most importantly, the doctors, around the fact that, yes, there are malicious emails that are being sent out to millions of people with the sole intention of you clicking on a link or clicking on an attachment, and that action results in a cyber attack against your computer or computers. So you're right. I mean, here's the perfect example. We had an oral surgeon that put an ad out on Craigslist for a surgical assistant. About an hour later, he gets a resume, and he's like, wow, Craigslist is awesome. I already got a resume. And in the body of the email, it says, I password protected this Microsoft Word document. When you open it, enter this password. He's like, oh, okay, I guess they're just wanting to keep their stuff confidential. So the Microsoft Word document opens, he enters the password, and within 5 minutes, every single computer on his server was fully encrypted with ransomware. Okay, 100% data encryption, all his x-rays and patient records, everything. And to your point, how do you know? Well, typically, some of the things are obvious, right? Broken English, improper use of words, things like that. But I'm telling you, it's changing, right? The hackers are getting really, really good at not doing that anymore, because they know that, if, I speak English really well, meaning a doctor, and I see these typos, I'm probably going to say, yeah, you know what? The orthodontist down the street wouldn't send me an email like this. But when they get an email that looks like it's coming from the account of, a referral, a colleague, and it's worded properly, and it may even reference the name of a patient, which we need to talk about, yeah, you're going to click on that. But through education and awareness, it's going to make you think twice. Before I just quickly click on this link that looks like it's a Panorex, maybe I need to look at a couple other things, determine, is this really coming from Smile Dental? Right? Is this really the doctor sending this email, or did someone hack her account or his account? right? And it's, they're using the information that they leverage from that system to attack my network. I see it all the time. They'll hack into one office, read the emails, and say, oh, check this out. They send a whole bunch of x-rays to ABC OMS practice. Guess what the hackers do? They will create an email that looks very similar as the one coming from that GP to that OMS practice. And instead of attaching like a Panorex, they attach a piece of malicious code, right? And that person sitting at the front desk is like, oh, another referral, click, and they get hit.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to specifics. So an oral surgeon placed an ad on Craigslist for a dental assistant. Within an hour, he gets emailed a resume. But what happened there? That asked him to enter a password to open the...
Yeah.
So what happened?
Right.
So he gets this resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that the technical, non-technical aspects are, you get this resume per se, right? You punch in this password into Microsoft Word. When you click the little OK button to accept your password,
but wait, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. So if you email me a Word document, then I click the resume. I click to go open it, and then
click to open it. It opens, and then it'll prompt you to enter a password. The hacker would have transmitted that password in the body of the email to you. So it'll say, dear Dr. Smith, I've attached my resume. Here's the password to open it. So then you as the doctor double click on the resume. It opens Microsoft Word. A pop-up box appears prompting you for the password. You punch the password in, click OK, and what happens is Microsoft Word has basically the ability to execute a command, and instead of running a legitimate command, it executes a malware or ransomware attack against the network.
And
does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never seen that scenario, but that's amazing. So what do you do when you get an email and some red flags? And by the way, younger kids, maybe you know this and I didn't, but your body, biologically, the brain was designed for instant processing. I mean, you're walking down a trail, a lion jumps out. You don't have time to go through, is that a carnivore, an omnivore? Is that a herbivore? He's got long fangs. Should I be... Your mind goes through it instantly. And that's what that intuition is. You have an intuition, and you always hear people saying, like, I know I shouldn't say this, but... And you're like, wait, stop. Your brain just told you shouldn't say it, and you're still going forward. You just learned, but so you look at an email, and you just instantly felt something's not right because maybe it's not the right language. Something's not right. What do? Do you just delete it and say if it's good, he'll contact me by another means? He'll call or text, or is there anything else you could do?
Sure, there's lots of things you can do. So, if it's something that's of importance to you or maybe important, pick up the phone, call them. Hey, listen, I just got this weird email from you. Before I download or click on this, can you just confirm that you sent this to me? That's step one. The other thing you can do is text them, right? Hey, just got a weird email from you. Before I open it, can you respond? Don't hit reply and say, hey, Dr. Mary, got this weird email from you. Can you just confirm that it's really from you? Because the hacker is going to respond, yes, it is, right? Because they have access to that sender's email account. So verbal confirmation, even if it's within your own practice, has to happen, okay? So there's something called a security-aware culture. It's really important that every practice has a security-aware culture, and a security-aware culture can only come from training. You can't just tell everyone on your staff, all right, everyone on your team, I want you guys to be security-aware. It doesn't work that way. Just like doctors prepare for emergencies through training, you have to train to prepare for these types of malicious emails.
I wish you'd make an online continuing education course about this on Dental Town. Have you ever considered that, or do you already have a course made?
Yeah, we have courses made. Be happy to talk to you about that for sure.
Well, we need to do that because, since we're dentists, our motto is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely.
That's how we analyze every situation. So what would be the the ounce of prevention to prevent a pound of cure. What are my homies? They're listening to you. They are already sick and nauseous and ill from COVID-19. And now you have to add another aspect of a virus.
I feel really bad right now, actually.
If the coronavirus wasn't bad enough, let's talk about computer viruses.
Right. So let's talk about that real quick, because every single cyber attack we've dealt with, when you dig into it and understand exactly what happened, they are all preventable. Okay, they are all preventable through common measures that a cybersecurity company can offer. So I think that's really important. So doing, like we talked about before, the vulnerability management, penetration testing, which we didn't talk about yet, which is an ethical hacker on our team who tries to break into your network. And then however he manages to break in, we take that data and turn it over to your IT vendor and say, hey, this is how we broke in. Here's what you need to lock your doors. And then to your point, training. Okay. 50-ish% of email-based cyber attacks could be prevented if proper training was in place. There are studies that go anywhere from 50 to 90% reduction in email-based cyber attacks through training. I'm more of a conservative person, so I'll throw the lower number out there. But I can tell you for a fact, we've trained thousands and thousands of people, and we have yet to have really any type of attack through email that tells you that this type of training is highly effective, because that completely beats the odds, right? If you talk to practices that haven't been trained, they're like, yeah, we had someone click on something, we got viruses, we got ransomware attack because someone clicked on something. Well, just think, your ounce of prevention. Well, if you invested an hour and a half of your time and trained your staff, and that could mitigate the chances of you having to lock your doors for 2 to 4 weeks or more, for me, that's a no-brainer. I think it's really important. And if you look at the sophistication of these emails, it's crazy, right? I mean, they're leveraging the COVID attack right now, as I had mentioned before, to get people to click on things. This isn't something that's been in the hopper for years and is constantly recycled. They're like, what's the latest news story? Let's go after it. And that's how these hackers think.
Wow, that is amazing. So what's next? What were the other things you said we didn't get to?
So what was the other thing? We talked about what I call ransomware version 2.0, which is the theft of the data and then the encryption. I think practices really need to sit down and critically think about that situation and not say to themselves, oh, I have a good backup now, because it doesn't matter, right? If your data's stolen, it's a total game changer. This just started mid-December of 2019. Where
do you think this is really coming from, though? I mean,
why are they doing it?
No. I mean, where? I mean, do you think it's like a third the U.S., third China, third Russia? I mean, that's what the that's what the conspiracy. Or do you think these are lone wolf programmers that?
These are most of the attacks we're seeing against the dental practices are highly sophisticated and highly organized attackers. The code is some of the most advanced code that's been written to date. These operations that are attacking the practices, they run into the hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue generation. That's what they are, right? They're basically illegal, illegitimate businesses. Sorry, wrong phrase there. Illegitimate businesses that are generating hundreds of millions of dollars in ransomware payments. They can afford to hire the best programmers. These are typically, to answer your question, not coming from the U.S. Okay, we have yet to see, any of these attacks that we can trace back coming to the U.S. They are typically coming from, like you said, Russia, China, Iran. These are all countries that have, not only the countries have very sophisticated programs, but there are operations within those countries that have these types of programs. So
also is a lot of this linked, or does this tarnish the reputation of digital currencies like Bitcoin, or is it more really the root of it that Bitcoin really from its get-go was an underworld currency of people the people that are trading nefarious goods use? I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's branding tarnishing the reputation, or that's really their core of who they are from the day one?
Yeah, look, the challenge with cryptocurrency is it's relatively untraceable, right? And that's the challenge. I take $50,000, transfer it to Bitcoin. send it to a threat group, it's almost impossible to figure out where that money went because of the nature of cryptocurrency. So could one argue that maybe, that this was created because of that demand? My feeling is that that's definitely a possibility. But for argument's sake, which is probably never going to happen, if we shut down cryptocurrency, I don't think the threat groups, the threat actors are just going to close their doors. They will figure a different way of soliciting money, having you, transfer some type of payment some way to get your data back. It's definitely not gonna go away. So,
well, I mean, if they would have never invented Twitter, Anthony Weiner would be the mayor of New York City.
Right. Yeah. Look. Yeah, I get it. It's the whole chicken or the egg concept, right?
Yeah. Which came first, Anthony Weiner or Twitter?
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to steal that analogy. So, so I think that's that's the issue. The whole problem with this, there's so much money in these ransom payments now. You look at some of the hospitals that are paying out millions of dollars to get their data back. So to put it into perspective, because I want your colleagues to understand, we had a GP out in the West, and he got hit. Small office. He just bought the office, within about a year. Had about 10 computers, which is the typical, build out for average GP. He walked into his office one morning and found all his computers encrypted by a highly, highly sophisticated group. Okay, this wasn't some dude sitting in a house in the Middle East. This was a legit operation. They wanted $117,000 to decrypt his data. He couldn't come up with the money, but he literally dodged an atomic bomb, because through a conversation I had with him, I said, is there any chance in this case you have a cloud backup? He's like, well, I have the name of software, which pretty much everyone has. And he's like, but I don't pay this company to do a backup. I was like, do yourself a favor. Before you throw in the towel, call the company and say, is there any chance you have a backup? He literally called me back, basically crying. He's like, I can't believe it. Somehow they have a backup of all my data. And he dodged, a huge issue. But for me, that was great. That the fact that just that conversation that I had with him, recovered his whole practice. Otherwise, he had no idea. He's like, I don't have that kind of money. I don't have $200,000 in legal fees and ransomware and IT to get all my data, my systems back.
Your shirt says Black Talon Security, face toward enemy. Where does the word Black Talon, what is that? And Talon is an eagle's claw?
Yeah, that's literally what it is. I wanted something, that showed power, and prestige. So I was kind of thinking eagle and, things like that. And we actually have a digital flag on the back of our T-shirts. So, it's all, can you see it?
Yeah.
It's all zeros and ones. Yeah. So we have the flag made out of that with zeros and ones.
So does this come from your roots in West Point?
I've always had so I also have a law enforcement background. But my real start into cybersecurity was that cloud solution when you read off my bio. So in 2000, I deployed really one of the very first dental-based cloud systems before anyone even knew what the word cloud was. Back then, you probably remember, it was called server-based computing. And we had, 1,000+ people logging in. I was like, at this point—
What was the name of that? What was the name of that software?
That was, the name of the company was called OMS Comp, like computers. And the product was called Net OMS. It was a platform built for the oral surgery market. But my first segue into security was this. We started realizing we've got a tremendous amount of data here, and all these practices across the US rely on us to serve up their information. So at the time, Cisco, which is still one of the leaders in security, released a new product called an intrusion protection system. And it was designed to basically monitor the network, and if it noticed something different, it would basically shut the network down to try and prevent the loss of information. So I distinctly remember this. My head engineer walks into my office. He's like, we have a major problem. He's like, you remember that IPS system we just spent, $10,000 on? I was like, yes. He's like, it just shut down 1,000 people. I'm like, yeah, that's not good. And the phone systems light up because everyone's like, hey, we can't get in. How when the cloud goes down, what happens? So anyway, we ended up making a phone call to, the FBI in New York City. They sent some agents up, and we met with them. And my engineer walks back into my office. He's like, hey, I have some information. I think I know who these guys are. So we turned that over to the FBI. And long story short, in this case, they did find him. They traced his IP address back to his house. And it was a guy sitting in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that hacked into the system. They did not steal any data or gain access to it. They breached part of the system, but the intrusion shut them down. He ended up, being charged and found guilty, and he spent some years in jail over it. So that was really my first interest, and I think I followed it throughout, my career. Over the last couple of years prior to starting this organization, we were starting to get phone calls. Hey, I got hit with ransomware. My system's down. I've been down for a week. What can you guys do to help us out? And at my previous job, there wasn't a lot we could do. Maybe put them on some cloud technology if they had a viable, offsite backup. And I think that it just kind of got my mind going, saying, hey, there's something new here, right? I never got these types of phone calls from, dental practitioners, and now I am. So obviously there's some type of demand, and I've kind of just grown up in my whole life, trying to help people and do things, that change people's lives. And I'm like, hey, this stuff's no joke, right? When you see what this does to someone's practice, you realize how bad it really is. Maybe I can help people, right? And use my talents and, bring together some really, really smart people in this industry to help defend these networks. And that's kind of how we got to where we are.
I want you to also, the American Association of Orthodontics just formed an exclusive endorsement with you.
Right.
I own OrthoTown magazine, and that's a very hard endorsement to get. How did you get that endorsement?
Yeah, so we went through an extremely lengthy vetting process. I will say it was well in excess of 1 year, where the AAO basically dug into, all of our operations, talked to our clients, wanted to see the success rate of what we're doing, talked to other companies that we work with. And I think the AAO wanted to lead the charge and say, hey, we understand what's going on in this community right now. We want to be able to educate and provide a solution to our orthodontists so they can make a good decision. All right. So the thought process here is, if we tell our members about it and they decide to do something, hey, great. If we tell our members and they opt not to do something and something happens, at least we did what we should do as an organization, educated them, and they were able to make their own decisions. The challenges that I'm seeing right now is, a lot of your colleagues say, I just had no idea this stuff exists. How come I didn't hear it from my state organization? So I think the AAO said, we want to, lead the charge here and make sure our members are educated. So, to answer your question, a very thorough vetting process.
And you started with another specialty. You started with oral and maxillofacial surgeons.
Yeah.
So are those your two most successful footholds in dentistry, oral surgeons and orthodontists, or general dentists make up a big bulk?
Yeah. We definitely have the specialty markets. We have a lot of pedo practices, ortho, oral surgery, perio. Yeah. And then we have a ton of GPs as well. It really
How
varies.
many clients do you have in dentistry in America? Do you share those numbers?
I don't publicly, unfortunately, but I can tell you that it's, we secure somewhere around 10,000 workstations across the U.S. in dental.
Wow. Well, I really wish you would do this. Like say, if the smartest dentist that ever stood in my office opened up a bad email, my gosh, the staff needs more training. And I think that was the biggest takeaway, that you need to have an unplugged from your network off-site backup. And you need to get a protocol and a training, because there's a couple of viruses going viral, and it's not just coronavirus. It's what do you call it, this virus?
There's malware. Yeah. There's two primary ones right now that are causing a lot of problems. One is called Emotet. You can look it up. EMOTET.
EMOTT.
EMOTET, like Thomas Edward Thomas.
Okay.
And then the other is called TrickBot, like common spelling, like a robot. TrickBot.
One word.
These two viruses are engineered to steal usernames and passwords as you enter them. So basically what happens is, if you get this virus on your computer, and keep in mind, one thing that I did not mention that I have to mention is antivirus software is highly, highly ineffective at stopping ransomware. If anyone says, oh, you have antivirus software on your computer, you can't get ransomware, find a new vendor, okay, find a new IT company because they don't understand what's going on. Almost all this new code that's being written is engineered to first shut off your antivirus software so it can go undetected. But this Emotet and TrickBot, they are designed to steal credentials, meaning your username and password. So the second you log into your insurance company website to check someone's claim, right, Stacy or Dave at the front desk types in username, right, Dave123 password, punches that in, and then TrickBot or Emotet will steal that information and transmit it back to the hackers, and they'll say, here's the web address, here's the username and password, and boom, they get right in. And that's also another concern for people who use cloud computing. Everyone's like, well, I'm just going to move all my data to the cloud and I'm safe. I'm telling you, cloud definitely has some advantages. You heard my background. I'm a proponent of the cloud. But if you think you're going to go unscathed by doing nothing from a security perspective, it's definitely a problem, right? So, people can take a look.
I've had the huge honor of hearing Jamie Dimon speak 3 times in my 30 years. I've been Chase banker, and whenever he comes to town, and my gosh, the last time I heard him talk for an hour, it was the billions of dollars he's spending on this. I mean, and a lot of people, and just last to go, a lot of people think that America, the government of America, is not on top of this, that they're behind the 8 ball. What do you think America's preparedness? You're a West Point man. Are we prepared for this, or are we really going to get caught when the tide goes out, swimming with no pants on?
Right. So I guess it's a philosophical question. Are we relying on the government to protect our businesses? And I think that's what you have to break it down to. I think the answer is businesses have to protect themselves. Now, should the government provide, some protections? I think they do, but you're looking at it. I don't really want to go this direction, but you're looking at it more of, a warfare perspective. What if a foreign country attacks our grid system, takes our power grids, transit systems, things like that? Yes, I think the government has the capabilities of helping defend against certain things like that. But are they responsible for protecting a healthcare provider? A small business, a medium business, a Fortune 100 company? I don't think so, right? Can they provide intelligence, that can better protect these? They do. We work very closely with certain government agencies with intelligence sharing, right? We will provide them information, they will provide us information, and we can disseminate that. There have been times when we've been given information and we're able to disseminate that information to IT companies, right? The IT companies can take that data and load it in to protect these dental offices. We can go directly to our clients and load this information. Hey, do this, right, in order to protect from that without going into the details. That's effective. Okay, so I'm a member of various organizations, and there's a tremendous amount of intelligence sharing right now through secure groups with the intention of taking certain information from government agencies and disseminating it to protect infrastructure. So I think from that aspect, I'm seeing a lot of really good things coming out from like the FBI, Homeland Security, and other organizations suggesting what you're doing. But are they going to manage firewalls and things like that? They're absolutely not going to do that. Right. So did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I look forward to you making us an online CE course for the staff. That would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is a pleasure and an honor. And everyone stay safe out there and, do the best you can.
And it was an honor for me to finally meet Salman the man and not just the fish. Have a great day.